Welcome to the Waking Space, everybody. Today we're going to cover the mad media. That's what I like to call it because it is quite insane. We're going to get into some of the weird things the media does, some of the psychology behind it. We'll cover a bit about fake news, whether that's a thing. So stay tuned even if you think you know it all. The fundamental question for this video is, where do our opinions come from? Now, when I ask this to most people, they go, from my brain, I just have my own opinions. But the truth is, our opinions don't come from us just sitting around going, what do I think about this topic? Most of our opinions are actually based on information we got from the media, other people who then got their opinions from the media. So this is why the media is so important, because where we get our information determines our opinions. If I asked you, hey, what do you think about what's going on in Syria? You wouldn't have just come up with that opinion on your own. You would base it on the information you got, and most of that would have come from the media. So what is it? Media is any means of communication. Anything that gets information from one place to another, from one brain to another brain. This includes social media, movies, television, the radio, internet, all of it. Now, mass media is communication that reaches large audiences with no personal contact. Now, this is relatively new for human history. I mean, only since the radio, maybe the printing press, has mass media been around, but it's even bigger than ever. We can now communicate all across the world instantaneously. And it's scary when you realize just how few avenues of media there are. There's really just a handful of companies that own most of the mainstream media. TBS owns all of those channels. General Electric, which is an energy company, owns all of those. Then you got News Corp. Then Walt Disney pretty much owns everything else. Now, why is this a problem? Because if all of your information is only coming from a handful of sources, there's no way you're getting the entire story, especially when these sources are what are called vested interest. They have a reason for wanting us to believe what they say. And maybe you've seen the videos of newscasters spilling the exact same line from multiple different news agencies. This is what you get when you have only a handful of companies giving us our media, which is their version of truth, which doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but the odds that you might be wrong are higher. So this idea of cui bono, which is Italian for who benefits, is really important. An interested party is anybody who gains from you believing them. Now, what kind of things could they gain? Maybe it's your vote. Maybe it's that you buy their products. In the end, it all kind of ends up being money, to be honest. So every time you hear a piece of information, you could ask this question, well, who benefits if I believe you? And if that person or group does benefit, you have to take that into consideration. A good example is when they start using appeals to authority, which is just another persuasive technique where I use an authority figure to give the information out because you're more likely to believe in authority. So it could be a doctor or somebody who looks like a doctor. It could be a celebrity or a celebrity / former president. Now, all of these people are vested interest. They gain something when we believe them. In this case, it's money. If we believe them, we're more likely to buy their products. So when there is an interested party, it doesn't mean you have to discredit them automatically. They could be telling the truth, but you have to keep that into consideration and use those critical thinking skills. What are they saying? Does it make sense? So how do we judge a source's credibility? I mean, credentials are one thing. People get all fluffy about credentials, but really they just tell you they passed the exam. It doesn't tell you if your doctor was a straight A student and passed medical school, or if he just barely passed. Accomplishments and reputation, again, this is more of a popularity thing. People can become very popular and be horrible at what they do. Is there a vested interest or bias? We gotta take that into consideration. But lastly, the best thing is just knowledge and reasoning. What are they saying and does it make sense? That's how I'm going to judge whether this source is credible or not. So 2 things you want to avoid when judging information. Well, first thing is trusting everything. If you trust absolutely everything you're told, you are bound to get duped. The second is to not trust everything you're told. I mean, think about it. How would I know Australia even exists if I didn't just trust it based on what somebody else told me? I have to find some kind of balance in between these 2 things. From complete gullibility to complete skepticism. Find that middle path. It's actually hard to convey just how powerful the ideas that we're presented with the media are. We soak up ideas from the media, from movies, from the news, and that becomes our reality. And I can prove this to you. Our brains are tricked so easily. I mean, think about the last time you watched some scary movie. Why did you get scared? You got scared because your brain was tricked that that was reality. Your blood pressure went up, your respiration went up, you probably started sweating a little bit, your adrenaline shot through the roof. Your brain was tricked that what you were seeing was real. So think about how many things we've seen over our entire lifetime through movies and television and the news. That's where we got our ideas of what's normal, what reality is really like, what we should and shouldn't do in certain situations. That's how powerful this thing is. Let's just take one example with the media and gender. Specifically, let's talk about females. We know that 50% of American teenage girls spend about half their day consuming media. Well, what kind of messages are being sent? It's always be thinner, be attractive, use your looks. We know most leading roles are going to males. Now, some media are trying to change that, but do you notice anything in particular? Yeah, it's the same hypersexualization and objectification of those women when they're in the lead roles. Let's look at an even more extreme example. This is Al Hura. Al Hura is a US government sponsored, we own it, Arabic language television network. It runs 24 hours, it gets about 21 million weekly viewers in 22 Arab countries. Now, one of our laws passed in 1948 authorized the US government to disseminate information abroad about the US and its policies. And it also prohibited domestic dissemination of that same information, meaning we could spill all of the information we want about the US, but American citizens actually couldn't access it up until 2013. Imagine that. Imagine a different country having a CNN type news station in America, and nobody really knew it was from that country. We just call that straight up propaganda. Or how about this one? During the first 4 years of his presidency, George W. Bush spent $250,000 on what are called VNRs, video news releases. So these were fake news. They looked like real news, but they were constructed by the US government to improve public opinion. Now, Clinton did the exact same thing. He used these VNRs as well. Again, we would just call this propaganda. I'm not saying all news is fake. I'm saying there are instances where we absolutely know that what we were getting was not the truth. Now, there's a way to use our obsession with media to our advantage. Think of a show you watch every day, but it's not your favorite. I don't want to take away your favorite show. Now, add up the time that you watch that in an entire year. That's how much time you could be spending on different types of media. Good films, good documentaries, good podcasts. That's how many chapters of good books you could read. So we can kind of hack the system by making sure the sources of media are good and solid. In fact, to see this, you can do this little experiment. You're going to read 10 pages of a really good, solid book every day. He or she's going to read 10 pages of Cosmo or some other magazine that's kind of trash. Now, would anybody notice a difference after a week between the two of you? No, that's not how change works. But after a year, you guys would seem like remarkably different people. Again, the importance of this can't be understated. Information is power. Where you get that information will determine your entire perspective on life, your worldview, and your view of reality. So where you get your information is absolutely important. Check sources, check my sources. Make sure you're getting an accurate view of reality. Speak of the devil, here are my sources for this video. Check them out. Make sure I'm not blowing smoke up your arse. As always, guys, thanks for listening. If you really like this stuff, keep delving further. Next video will be about the advertising industry. See you here next time.